Hello and welcome to episode 125 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. Today and next week, Marisa from Chicago will be joining me on the show so we can cover a very controversial topic. Has Disney messed up Star Wars? Marisa is wearing her soundproof headphones right now, so I'm going to surprise her with the topic. I want her first reactions. I will describe what I mean when Marisa joins us. Of course, last week we welcomed Alicia Stella to the podcast, and we talked all about Universal's Epic Universe theme park coming to Orlando in 2025. We also discussed her June fundraiser for the Trevor Project. Please go to orlandoparkstop.com/charity to donate, or you can also look at items for sale or for auction with the money going to the Trevor Project. To tug at your heartstrings a little more, my birthday is next week, so I would love if you would make a donation to the Trevor Project and do it in our name here at Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Let Alicia know it was worth it to join us. orlandoparkstop.com/charity. Now let's bring Marisa back on the show. Thanks for being here, Marisa.
Thank you for having me.
So, Marisa, are you ready to try to talk about a topic that I have not cleared with you before we started this recording?
Yeah, I'm ready to try. I'm
No,
very
see,
excited.
Marisa, do or do not. There is no try. So there is your hint. Very recently, Disney announced that they are closing down the Galactic Starcruiser that is right beside Disney's Hollywood Studios. We have talked about this Starcruiser a number of times in the past, and we have a lot of theories as to why it closed and what they did wrong. But I am going to have a more big picture umbrella question for you, and that is, in retrospect, has Disney messed up Star Wars? Now, I know this is going to, at first glance, sound like I am jumping on the bandwagon of a lot of neckbeards on the internet, because they will say that Disney has messed up Star Wars, but they are talking more about the movies and the TV shows and having things not exactly the way that they envisioned them. And we're not talking about that right now. We will get to the movies and we'll get to the TV shows. But as we look back now, with Galaxy's Edge having been open for a few years now, with the Galactic Starcruiser, I think we have to say it was a failure. I think at this point we have to declare that it did not work. At the very least, we're going to have to say Disney has made some mistakes with their execution of Star Wars in the parks. So I want to ask you a few questions about that, and then we'll come to our grand conclusion at the end of the episode.
Oh, I'm ready.
So we're going to have to start with the Starcruiser. That's the most recent thing. What are your thoughts on it closing this early in the process?
I think my biggest shock is that Disney gave up on it so quickly. I don't think I'm necessarily surprised that the audience wasn't there, because it was a pretty niche group, both in terms of interest and the ability to book it. So I'm not really surprised that that ran out when it did, but I am surprised that Disney gave up on it when they did. I think I would have expected them to try to push it a little bit more, whether in terms of making changes and adapting to try to keep the experience afloat, or offering different types of discounts or incentives to get people to book. So I think it surprised me that they kind of pulled the plug so soon.
So I know a very common topic of conversation around the community is, I can't believe Disney closed it before they made it more affordable. And the only answer I really have to that line of thought is this might just be so expensive to operate that it wouldn't make sense for them at a lower price point. However, I think where you were going with your statement is maybe they could cut back on some of those costs and make it not as expensive an experience and then allow people to still enjoy it. They built this entire thing, and of course, we don't know what they're going to do with it later. They might actually do some of these things that we mention, but making it an experience where you didn't have to book 2 or 3 days and be basically trapped on the Star Cruiser for most of your time, and making this more like a Star Wars themed hotel, like some of the other hotels throughout property, where maybe you do have some characters hanging out in the lobby that you can see before you go to the parks or when you return from the parks, or maybe even have them there throughout the day, but where you don't have to let this take up your entire vacation and you don't have to have every single minute themed. I think that's where they lost a lot of people, because that is a very niche thing. And once you've reached everybody who wants to do that, you don't have a lot of ability to expand.
I agree. And I also think, they did it towards the end where they started offering, if you booked Star Cruiser, you could get a discount on a hotel room, before or after your stay. I feel almost like, I think the operating costs for Star Cruiser were so high that you're right, they couldn't really discount the experience much more than they already were. But if they had done something where they said, hey, you stay at Star Cruiser and you get a 2-day park hopper, then families are going to be, or anyone is going to feel a little bit more justified paying $6,000 for a 2-night experience, because it's a lot to visit Disney World and essentially only see one park for half a day at that price point. So I just feel like they needed to look at it from a different angle a little bit and say, how do you entice people to make this part of their vacation and give them a discount to the rest of their vacation so they feel like they're spending that time wisely and the money.
And this is basically based on a cruise. And if you look at Disney Cruise Line, which is more expensive than other cruise lines, but they have 7-day cruises, they have 3-day cruises, they have Star Wars at sea, Marvel at sea. Sometimes you're seeing Frozen characters. Sometimes there's a Tiana restaurant on the boat. There are different experiences on all these different excursions on Disney Cruise Line. But there was a one-size-fits-all experience on the Disney Star Cruiser. So maybe you do have all immersive weekends, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights are these all-inclusive, we're cosplaying, we're doing all the stuff. But if you want to stay Monday through Friday and go to the parks and still see Chewbacca when you're coming in from Magic Kingdom at night, and you want to stop at that incredibly themed bar, maybe you don't want to take your entire vacation and make it all about this Star Wars experience, but you wouldn't mind having an hour a night after the parks to go to the lounge, to eat at one of the restaurants, to do something like that. And then you're starting to offer more offerings, which is why Disney Cruise Line is so successful. And we've talked about lounges before on the show. Lounges are a big deal for people in the area. It's a way to get your annual pass holders, where you already complain that they don't spend enough money when they're at the parks. This is a way to get them to spend money. If they can go to the lounge in the hotel like they can at all of the other resorts, then they're going to go and they're going to spend $25 on a drink because it's themed towards Ewoks or whatever. It just seems like this was so short-sighted that they had one experience. This one experience has to fit every single traveler, and it's a very niche and very expensive thing.
I also feel like, and we've certainly talked about this a lot before as well, with the notion of the timeline and how, Disney feels like they have to stick with the sequel trilogy timeline. And if you'd opened up the Starcruiser and said, "Hey, you know, these sailings are going to be sequel trilogy, but on these specific dates, you get to see a showdown with Darth Vader." How many more people would say, "Okay, wait a minute, now I'm going to consider it because I get to see the characters from my childhood that, really resonated with me." And, this is my just personal opinion here, but, Darth Vader's arguably the best villain of the series. He's way more
He's
intimidating.
probably the best villain of all time.
I would agree with you. I think
I
that's a
mean,
very fair assessment. So, the thought that you get to do like a lightsaber training and then see a showdown with Luke battling Vader, that could have brought in a whole different crowd of people. Or, a smuggling mission with Han and Chewie. How many more people would have been interested in an experience like that as opposed to seeing the sequel trilogies that, it's good. Those movies are good movies, but they didn't have the impact that the original trilogy does.
and sort of piggybacking on what you just said, if this is a 3-day excursion, how about the first day there's Padme and young Obi-Wan Kenobi and Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. And then the second day there's Luke and Leia and Han and Darth Vader and Boba Fett and some of these characters. And then on the last night, there's Rey and there's Finn and there's Poe. There's a way to not ignore the sequel trilogy, which obviously Disney wants to push as much as humanly possible. There's a way to not ignore that while also going into the deeper tracks. Because I imagine an entire weekend in this timeline, one of the things about Disney and going to Walt Disney World is you're not stuck in a timeline. You go to Galaxy's Edge because it's in a galaxy far, far away in Star Wars, and then you walk down a walkway, and now you're in Andy's backyard. And then you walk around in a little more of a circle, and you're in 20s and 30s Hollywood. Like, that's the whole point of a Disney vacation, is you're not stuck in one location. So I agree that holding too firm to that timeline with the Galactic Starcruiser in particular was definitely a huge mistake.
Yeah, and I understand, it makes sense. Obviously, they want to promote the sequel trilogy, but they also have been creating these new TV shows and these new movies. Well, not movies, but they've been creating these new TV shows. They could have been using it as a promotion for that. I mean, Rogue One was very successful. They went back and made the Andor TV show. They went back and made an Obi-Wan TV show. I mean, they could have had a Boba Fett experience. Imagine a Mandalorian themed Star Cruise where, you get to interact with Grogu. Holy cow, people would be lined up out the door to try to get their 5 minutes with Grogu.
So, mentioning Grogu and how popular it is to see Grogu and how people go crazy for him, I'm going to move on and into the theme parks and start talking about Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Right now, I'm going to specifically be talking about the version at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World and how they have incorporated the Mandalorian not as a meet and greet, but as a walk-around character. And that includes the Mandalorian having Grogu, Baby Yoda in a little satchel and walking around Star Wars Galaxy's Edge. Earlier this month, I experienced that for the first time. I was meeting up with people in Galaxy's Edge. I wasn't even thinking about Mandalorian being there. I wasn't even worried about it. I had a lot on my mind, and I had to get to work and all that kind of stuff. But I was sitting there and I'm like, what is this fuss that's happening over here? And Mando had come out. So, of course, I'm just trying to get a picture of the Mandalorian with Grogu. And they're so committed to making this a walk around thing that it's so incredibly awkward. And you just have a cast member not screaming. The cast member was perfectly fine and was doing her job 100% the way she was asked. But saying he's just walking around. If you ask him for a picture, he may stop, but it's up to him. And like, there's no immersion when that's happening. So why don't we just, like every other character in Walt Disney World, put him against a wall that looks really cool and let people meet the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda just like they do with everybody else at Walt Disney World. We've talked about this before, how Walt Disney World doesn't have the muscle memory for these types of walk-around character events, but they really don't when it's a character who is this popular. Everybody wants their picture with Grogu and the Mandalorian. This isn't like Winnie the Pooh, who you can have Winnie the Pooh kind of walking around in Epcot and people won't like mob him. This is too new. Disney knows what happens when things are new. This is a big failing on Disney's part. It was brilliant to bring the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda to Galaxy's Edge in Walt Disney World, but the way they are doing it is just causing more hassle than it's worth.
I agree. I have seen plenty of pictures of people with the Mandalorian and Grogu in Hollywood studios, and I have not seen a single one where he is not completely mobbed, where it's just like a swarm of people surrounding the Mandalorian and they're like trying to get a picture before he moves again. So I feel like this character, it's very cool that he's in Galaxy's Edge, but I feel like he is such a prime candidate for Launch Bay that I don't know why they didn't just put the Mandalorian plus Grogu in Launch Bay, and then you're driving people out of Galaxy's Edge so it's not as congested. You're not having people block the walkways in Galaxy's Edge. You get people lined up for however long that line's going to be, and let's be real, it's going to be a pretty decent line. So other lines are shorter, other experiences are easier to, accomplish. I'm always baffled by how that just didn't happen.
I had actually gotten lucky the day that I was there. I did the new Ariel from the live action Little Mermaid meet and greet, and then I saw Mando and Grogu in Galaxy's Edge. So there were these two completely different character experiences. And did I wait in line for 45 minutes to meet Ariel from the live action? Yep, totally waited in line for 45 minutes. Were there a ton of kids there who were so excited and did not care? And when they finally got to meet Ariel, it was like one of the coolest moments in their lives. And they got to actually talk to Ariel and have a good couple of minutes with her to interact with her instead of just trying to rush a picture. Walt Disney World is a vacationer's theme park resort. And you just have to remember that there are a lot of things that these people want to check off their list that's important to them. And sometimes we can't do these things like they do in Disneyland when people can go more, when people are used to how characters interact in those situations a little more. And I just think right now it's just a little too much. Chewie still runs around Galaxy's Edge. Rey does it. Vi, the Stormtroopers, Kylo Ren. There's enough of that interactive character experience in Galaxy's Edge. This one thing we can turn a little bit more into conveyor belt Walt Disney World, because I don't think anybody's getting the experience out of that meet and greet. And I'm going to say this. I know you've seen a lot of pictures and videos of it online, and sometimes you'll look at Darth Vader in Star Wars Launch Bay and you'll think that looks incredible, but then when you're there you're like, oh, okay, I kind of like, maybe it's not that awe-inspiring. When you are standing in front of the Mandalorian, it looks like you are watching the show on Disney Plus. Like, this looks like he just walks straight out of your laptop. I don't know how people watch their Disney Plus. I watch it on a laptop. So it is worth it to make this experience. Like, they didn't cheap out on the experience. I just really wish that they would maybe do that. I also like how over in Disneyland, they also incorporate Boba Fett and Fennec Shand. I wish that's something that would come to Walt Disney World.
Look, I'm still hoping for something with Cassian Andor, so, you know, I'm out on an island hoping for that one. It's never going to happen, and I'm probably the only one campaigning for it, but I want it.
We're going to be talking about this a little bit later, but I do think that maybe there's a better chance than you think, because I do feel Rogue One is kind of a unifying movie where basically everybody likes it, no matter what side of the Star Wars debate they find themselves. But we'll get to that in a little bit. I'm going to move on to something that I can't believe I am going to say this is a negative, but hear me out, Marissa. Star Wars Rise of the Resistance is too important of a ride for it to go down as much as it goes down now, and it is too important for them to put it down for actual maintenance, and they are ruining the best theme park ride in the Orlando area because they rushed to get it complete. It breaks down all the time. A good 25% of the time you're seeing it, it is a B mode experience. And actually, every time you're seeing it, it's a B mode experience because the cannons they don't even try anymore on some of the cannons. They have backed themselves into a corner where they can't say, oh, the week you're in Walt Disney World, Rise of the Resistance is going to be down that week. I really think they are messing up their absolute best ride.
Yeah, the last time, or not the last time, but in February when I was in Disney World with my mom, Rise of the Resistance was like her big thing that she wanted to do. That was her number one must do for the trip. And we were running a 10K. And like above finishing the 10K, her number one must do was Rise of the Resistance because she is that much of a Star Wars fan. And it took us 4 tries to get on that ride over a period of 2 days. And it meant that we cut out, we had planned to do the pool one day and we ended up never going to the pool because we had to go back to Hollywood Studios because it kept going up and down one whole day. So we had to go back the next day just to ride it. And we finally were able to. So it's definitely one of those things that when you catch it at a bad time, you really catch it at a bad time. And we were lucky enough that we had tickets for the next day and we had park hoppers, so we could make the trip over there. But if that's the last day of your trip or you don't have a park hopper, it is such a hugely in-demand ride. And it was just this moment when it happened to us where I was like, if they had delayed opening this ride by another like 6 months, how different would this experience be?
And as much as I wish that they would have done that, do the math in your head right now. December 2019, add 6 months to that. So
they could have had so much more time. You kidding me?
It would have been as good as Tron because they would have taken all that kind of extra time. They've really backed themselves into a corner by having such a great ride. Interestingly, you talking about going with your mother, earlier this year, I went with my mother. We got a 1-day park hopper for her so she could do Epcot. She hasn't done Epcot since 2018. And even though she was kind of in Hollywood Studios in 2018, she really just did the Beauty and the Beast show and ate at Brown Derby. And then we went back to Epcot. So this was her first time at Hollywood Studios since it was called MGM Studios. And when we got there, Rise had gone down. So we had a makeup time for Rise of the Resistance. And we decided to eat at Mama Melrose because we could get a quick reservation. And when we were in Mama Melrose, we saw that Rise was back and almost had to just like scarf down our food and then immediately run to Rise because we didn't want it to go down again. And I'm telling my mother, who's not a Star Wars fan, unlike your mom, but I'm like, trust me, like, you got to see this ride. Like, even if you don't like Star Wars or know Star Wars, like, this is impressive in and of itself. And I'm telling her how it's impressive, and I'm telling her how it's so impressive. And we see the room with the AT-ATs, and, you know, she obviously looks like, whoa, this is impressive. And we do all of those things, and then we get to the very end, and the Kylo animatronic's not working, so we get that B mode where he's on a video screen outside, and I'm like, I don't even want to tell her how much cooler it was supposed to be than what she actually got. And it's just unfortunate because you wait all day. Maybe you do get a return time. Like you said, you tried 4 different times. And then when you try 4 different times and you get on it and it's in B mode, that's really, really disappointing. And Marissa and I are spoiled. We get to go all the time. However, not everybody is like that. And not everybody gets that opportunity. And this happens way too much with this ride. Combine it with the fact that when Rise of the Resistance is down, then Slinky Dog Dash, add an extra 40 minutes to that wait time, add an extra 20 minutes to Tower of Terror, add an extra 30 minutes to Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. All of those people have to go somewhere, and they are going to the other rides in Hollywood Studios, so it kind of messes up the entire park when Rise of the Resistance is down for a long period of time. As much as I love this ride, I have to say it is almost turning into a net negative in Galaxy's Edge.
Yeah, it's one of those rides where you can appreciate that it's like 3 different ride systems combined into one. And it's really just this technological marvel when it all works correctly. And it's like just astounding seeing it all when it runs smoothly. But it's become such an iconic ride, and it's become so popular that I feel like, outside of what you just talked about how, if it goes down, all the other wait times go up, it goes down so frequently. But people really do feel like their trip is incomplete if they don't get to ride it. There's so much, pardon the pun, riding on this attraction that it's become a bit of a phenomenon. And when it goes down that often, you end up with a lot of people who feel disappointed or feel like they wasted money, even though, you do get to do so many other incredible things. It's just very interesting how that's come into play.
And I know your favorite theme park, Disney's Animal Kingdom, a lot of people have given it the reputation of being a half-day theme park. But I feel like if any park at Walt Disney World is a half-day park, it is Hollywood Studios. And if I wasn't getting a park hopper, I would not want to have to come back to this park a second time. There just aren't enough rides. There just aren't enough experiences. And people are planning their trips around this ride. They are spending the price of a Hollywood Studios ticket to ride this in a lot of situations. Plus, then you're doing individual lightning lanes. So you want to make all that money. You don't want to have to refund people on individual lightning lanes because the ride isn't working. It's turned into a big mess, and I don't feel like it should have been this big of a mess. And it's really, really unfortunate. I want to move to some other aspects now of Galaxy's Edge in Walt Disney World at Hollywood Studios. This is not something that's a problem in Disneyland, but if you want to go to Ronto Roasters and you want to get a Ronto wrap, which is the signature food item in Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, I just saw your reaction when I brought up Ronto Roasters, so why don't you finish this for me?
They close at like 3 or 4 o'clock, and it's gotten me a couple times. Like, I know this, and I've still gone into Hollywood Studios and been like, you know what? I'm going to get a Ronto wrap for dinner, and I'm just going to walk around and enjoy it and eat it. And no, I'm not, because it's closed. I get that you can get a Ronto wrap at Docking Bay, but you have to get the Ronto wrap inside. So it's not the same thing. It's just getting a Ronto wrap to walk around and eat.
I know that might sound a little bit pedantic. However, you can't get the vegetarian, the vegan version of the Ronto wrap. in Docking Bay 7. So while you can get the original Ronto wrap and they can say, well, you can still get it, you only can if you're a meat eater. If you don't eat meat, or if it's a Friday during Lent and you're Catholic, there are a number of reasons why people wouldn't want to get the meat version, and you just can't get the vegan version after 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And park hopping starts at 2. They don't even let you hop to the park until 2. If they're closing Ronto roasters at 3 and you just get there at 2, you almost have to rope drop your food item. I understand it's hard to staff, and we get all of those things, but this is something that should be open all day. You can take one of those popcorn carts and shut it down at 4 o'clock and keep Ronto roasters going.
Seriously. And we're obviously hardcore Ronto wrap fans, but this is also, it's such a good late night snack that if you're in the parks in the evening and you're hungry, they would make so much money from late night Ronto wrap sales that they are totally missing out on right now. So close a popcorn cart.
Marisa, your favorite nighttime spectacular is Phantasmic. Right across from Phantasmic, they have one of those little quick service locations where you can get the vegan option is a vegan lobster roll, which is quite possibly the messiest food item in all of Walt Disney World. So if you get the vegan lobster roll and sit there while you wait for Phantasmic for an hour, you're spilling it all over yourself. I'm not saying I'm talking from firsthand knowledge or anything, but you're spilling it on your shirt. Your vlogs on your YouTube channel are looking awful. Anyway, I digress. Could you see if you could pick up a Ronto wrap in Galaxy's Edge and walk over and sit down for Phantasmic, and everyone in your party could have these nice, neat Ronto wraps that are wrapped in the pita and then wrapped in a little piece of paper so it'll catch all of your droppings. No, that would be too easy for Disney. They have to shut down that and make sure that you can buy a $30 popcorn bucket at 7:30 at night, because that's when you need to buy a refillable popcorn bucket, right? I tell you what, Marisa, this is probably a pretty good point to stop, and we will continue this conversation about Star Wars, because I have so much more to ask you about whether Disney is messing up Star Wars. So we will continue that next week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I cannot wait.
This has been episode 125 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Marisa will be back on the show next Thursday so that we can finally come to a conclusion on whether Disney has messed up Star Wars. Until then, have a great week.